Are you interested in free everyday online banking in Canada? Are you curious on how Tangerine and Simplii work?
Stay tuned and we'll give you the rundowns on how these free online banks work.
I'm Raymond.
And I'm MTS, and welcome to On My Financial Goals.
In our last video, we introduced two online banks, Simplii and Tangerine. In this video, we'll be covering more detail their savings accounts, checking accounts, e-transfers, getting checks, and of course, their limitations.
Let's start with checking accounts. By far, the most valuable thing about Tangerine and Simplii is that they both have absolutely free checking accounts with no minimum balance required. There really is no catch to this because there's no such thing as a bare bones account or elite account. Every Tangerine and Simplii customer really do have access to the same type of account right off the bat.
With the big five banks, the fees all range as low as $5 to as high as $30. Even the ones that are free have pretty bad limitations, like pay-per-use cash withdrawals.
Preposterous! I pay no fees with my minimum balance of $4,000.
Well, that's true and dandy, that some people do technically have free banking with the big banks. There are other opportunities that we should look at.
I admit, I was a lot like this too, but I soon realized that I'm losing out on making that $4,000 work for me. Let's face it, 4K isn't chump change, and you can definitely do something so much more with that money than just sitting on your checking account. Even with the most basic risk-free savings account that we all have access to, you can make that minimum balance work for you.
Let's do some quick math here. 2% of $4,000 is $80. That's $80 a year, or roughly $7 a month that you don't have to spend. In other words, you're now losing the $80 because you choose to have a free account with a bank.
And this is just the most basic savings rate that we all have access to. We both actually have very simple and basic investment portfolios where it will generally perform better than 2%. But that's a whole nother ballgame and a whole different story that we'll have to get into another video. For now, if you're interested, look up the Canadian couch potato portfolio.
All the major banks have ATMs or ABMs locations all over Canada. Well, what about Tangerine and Simplii? You don't see logos on their ATM. In the case you don't know, Tangerine is actually with Scotia and Simplii with CIBC.
So what this means is that you can use Scotiabank ATMs with your Tangerine card and CIBC ATMs with your Simplii card. And again, you can use them completely free with no charges. I know it sounds a little weird at first putting in a different debit card in another bank's ATM, but the way they work is that they simply piggyback off their bigger bank's network.
You can find Scotiabank ATMs at any Cineplex or 7-Elevens across the nations, and for CIBC ATMs, you can find them at any Petro or Pioneer gas station, or if you're in Ontario, you can also find them in en routes. For you travelers out there, you do get access to international ATMs with each bank, and while this is another topic on itself, but if you're interested, we'll provide more information below.
E-transfers have become more and more popular, and they are by far one of our favorite everyday banking features. It makes sending money to friends and family so much easier and instantaneous. It's unfortunate it took these big banks so long to realize this, but now that they have, they see it as yet another opportunity to grab fees from you depending on what type of account you have.
Simplii offers unlimited Interact e-transfers just like the big banks. There's no catch to this, so just go wild and have at it while you can. Tangerine, on the other hand, has two versions of the e-transfers. The more traditional Interact e-transfer will cost you $1 per transaction, but Tangerine also offers their own version of the e-transfer called EMT, Email Money Transfer, which is free. This method, however, makes your recipient do a little bit more work, like filling out information from a void check, but this is why this is free.
Now, our thoughts on Tangerine's EMT is that it works just like an Interact e-transfer for you as the sender, but it can also take a recipient about 2 to 3 days to get their money if they're not using a Tangerine account. Otherwise, it's instant. Your recipient might also get a little annoyed since they have to get their banking information, but in my experience, not a lot of people are going to complain about money that they're getting. In our opinion, it's not a bad way to send money if you know the person well and if they're in no rush to get their money. I personally send my rent money like this to my landlord and he's completely fine. But we wouldn't recommend this if you're sending to someone new or something like a deposit, and if they need money right away.
So e-transfers are starting to be the norm nowadays, and some people are still old school and still like to or need to use checks. Heck, I still use them to pay my rent, and sometimes to give gifts because I personally don't like to bring cash. Tangerine does offer the first 50 checks for free, and for an additional $20, you can get 50 more checks. Simplii, however, gives free unlimited checks. With the big five, however, only the big high-end accounts will give you free checks.
Both Simplii and Tangerine have very competitive high interest savings account. As of making this video, Simplii has a promotion of 3% and Tangerine is at 2.4%. The standard after promotion ends will typically be around 1%. With the big bags, you can expect it to hover around 0.2%, 0.5%, sometimes more. What I don't like about this is its complicated tiered structure. With that being said, if you don't have the time or effort to look into savings or investments, but you know that you want to save right now, by far the easiest and most reliable solution would be to go with any one of these free banks. Just like the big banks, Simplii and Tangerine offer RSP and TFSA accounts. They also both offer investment plans, which we will get into in another video.
This is probably the only major downfall about Tangerine and Simplii. While we did mention earlier that you do have access to ATMs, you're actually not going to be able to access their tellers, financial advisors, and the staff. All their services are done strictly online or on their 24/7 telephone service.
To add on what Ray said, this is where you have to ask yourself if having a physical person to assist you is worth paying extra for. I don't know about you, but I hate waiting in line at the bank, and it's not something I ever look forward to. What I like about both these banks is they make online banking really easy, and it's never been too troublesome to call them up either, since they're available 24/7 to help you.
Now, to recap everything we've said so far, you can see that with the big banks, it varies all depending on how much you're willing to pay for. It will be a daunting task to compare all the accounts offered, but the point we're trying to make is, why make everyday banking more complicated than it is? With these big banks, you have to keep track of what you can and cannot do, how much you've used them, etc. With Simplii and Tangerine, since there's only one type of account for each bank, it's a lot simpler.
So that pretty much covers most of our bases of what we feel Canadians need out of everyday banking. If you want to get into the nitty-gritty, we do have a table link for you in our description below. You're probably wondering whether you should go with
Team Simplii
or Team Tangerine. We feel you really can't go with either of the two, and it's down to the small, minute preferences. We personally have both and are happy with both accounts.
But if we had to choose one of the two, we would give the slight edge to Team Simplii! Sorry Tangerine, you had to step up your game. So one thing we want to emphasize is that both of these banks are completely free to open and try hassle-free. Actually, both Imtiaz and I opened the Tangerine accounts just because we wanted the $50 referral bonus. I thought, what's the worst that could happen? It's a free bank, and if I don't use it, I won't get charged, right? I don't think I was ever going to use it much more after the $50, but I ended up using it more and more and slowly converted it to my main account.
There's so many stories like this, and you really have nothing to lose just by trying them out and just to get your feet wet. The one thing you should be aware of, though, is something called a dormancy fee. This is something we actually discovered while we were making this video, but essentially you can get charged for leaving your account unused for a year.
Are you a Tangerine or Simplii customer already? And if so, what do you like? Or what do you miss?
What other features do you want from Tangerine or Simplii? Let us know in the comments below. We'll get back to you.